Welcome back to the program. Our next guest is a self-proclaimed academic in the field of modern horror films. He can be seen on his own program, Horror Movie Syllabus, which you can catch every Thursday night on the youtube.com channel. Please join me in welcoming Professor Victor. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. Basically, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. But this is our Is It Syllabus Worthy series, where I take a recommendation from you guys, something that I've never seen before that you guys recommend in the comments to one of my videos. Watch it for the first time and let you know, is it syllabus worthy? Do I think it's worthy of being on the Horror Movie Syllabus? But today we're doing it ever so slightly different. We're looking at a movie called Late Night with the Devil. And Late Night with the Devil wasn't actually recommended in the comments on any of the videos. It's just been recommended to me by a lot of people who've seen it. It is a relatively new movie, and it is something that's gotten a lot of buzz. A lot of people were talking about it. I wanted to see it, so I thought I'd check it out and thought it might be worth making a video about it, especially since, frankly, my time is limited. So it's hard for me to see new movies because I'm watching so many movies for the channel. So if I can combine the two, sometimes that works out pretty good for me. And I think this is one of those times. So while so many people have recommended to me, including a lot of you viewers, nobody formally recommended to me. So we're kind of bending the rules a little bit here. I guess I'm kind of recommending this one to myself, but I don't feel bad about it because I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this movie. It's pretty buzzworthy, a lot of talk about it both before it came out and then while it's been out, and it's still kind of hot off the presses. So I think it's worth digging into right now. I went into this one knowing a little bit more than I normally do with these recommendations. I had seen a trailer for it. I had an idea what the premise was. I knew who was in the movie, generally speaking. I knew the concept, and I knew that it was pretty popular amongst people, had a lot of good buzz going in. So I had a little bit more knowledge than normal, but that didn't necessarily impact one way or the other how I felt about the movie. Or did it? That might be something we wind up digging into a little bit as we go into it. And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of my review, tell you what I thought about it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and then ultimately we'll wind up in evaluating, is it syllabus worthy? So let's go ahead and dig into that review right now. Like I said, the movie that we're talking about today is Late Night with the Devil. Late Night with the Devil came out in 2023, apparently, although it seems most of us probably saw this in 2024, including myself. And so it's a little bit unclear exactly when it was released. And it was directed by Colin and Cameron Cairns, who I'm not familiar with. It sounds like they might be brothers. I don't know. I didn't really research them. They didn't seem to have a lot of, noteworthy stuff going on ahead of time. And so I didn't know much about them, didn't really learn much about them. I really wanted kind of the movie stand on its own anyways and figure out whether or not it lived up to the hype, which was pretty noteworthy going into this movie. A lot of people were really high on this movie before I saw it. If you haven't seen it, the movie is something of a mockumentary / found footage movie where it shows the footage of a live broadcast from the late 1970s, a late night talk show a la Johnny Carson, of a man who is struggling to find ratings and has decided to put a young girl who is supposedly possessed by a demon on his channel live on the air. And of course, as he does that, hijinks abound, things do not go as planned, and everything is captured on film for us to watch later on in that wonderful 70s aesthetic. But we'll go ahead and stop there so it's not spoiled for anybody who hasn't seen it. And it is, again, relatively new, so there's probably a lot of people who haven't seen it who might be meaning to see it. So we're going to try to traipse around not spoiling things too much while we talk about it. But we do have to get into some specifics to arrive at our conclusion. But we'll get into that in a minute. First, let's talk about the thing that I think that stands out the most and is probably the strongest thing about the movie, and that is that concept, that 70s aesthetic, that style, and that idea of setting this in a late night talk show from the late 70s and having that whole show be basically the movie. The concept is that the movie is showing you the raw tapes of that footage that was recorded that night live and broadcast and then never seen again, and all the crazy things that happened there. So it's kind of got this, found footagey style thing, but really kind of more of mockumentary style because it's got behind the scene footage and stuff. And it's a really strong idea because what we're really dealing with here is a possession movie. It's a basic possession movie, and we've talked about possession movies a lot. I like them a lot, but they all kind of, well, not all, but many of them, most of them, owe a lot of debt of gratitude to The Exorcist. They kind of mirror The Exorcist in terms of how they play out. And this movie kind of has that same base concept, but putting it in this setting with this concept of the found footage, the mockumentary thing, is fresh. It feels new. It feels interesting. The 70s aesthetic is very, very pleasing, especially for somebody my age who remembers these kind of shows. It really did a pretty good job of giving it that feel, with the exception that some of the filming techniques feel more modern, so it didn't really completely feel like it was filmed in the 1970s, especially the interludes, the behind the scenes footage, what happened during the commercial breaks, because there was a live show. They felt a little bit harder to buy into. Like, I really had to suspend my disbelief to buy into the way that the behind the scenes footage, the private conversations, were being recorded during the commercial breaks, because it just, the angles and everything that just didn't feel realistic, and they didn't feel 70s. So they weren't really nailing it there, but I was willing to forgive it because overall the concept was fun. I was enjoying this fresh idea on a possession movie. The idea of it being broadcast live on a late night talk show where everything's kind of zany and silly and they're cracking jokes was a fun concept. I think that was the big appeal in the trailer, and I think that's why a lot of people were interested in seeing it initially, was because of that setup. It's a really good hook. It got me engaged for sure. And it did. It felt a little bit different than seeing yet another possession movie, to shake it up a little bit in this format. Even if they didn't completely nail the format, especially in the interludes. And the ending kind of goes away from that format a bit. It really kind of goes in a different direction a little bit. And I know that there's been a lot of controversy or mixed opinions about that. Some people don't mind it. Some people have a big issue with it. I'm kind of leaning more towards the issue. I don't have a big issue with it, but I do think it doesn't match the rest of the aesthetic of the movie, the rest of the concept of the movie. It kind of breaks it a little bit. Does it do it so detrimentally? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later, but it is noteworthy to mention that it did not completely end in the same tone or vein or style that it started. Change in style aside, I'd say overall, this movie is extremely well made. The talent is very evident in this movie. I think it's competently directed. I think that the art direction is extremely solid. Like I said, it may not feel perfect, but it does feel like a late night talk show. It really does look like a late 70s a talk show set. They really got the look of things mostly down to a point where I felt like it felt authentic, even if it didn't really feel like I was watching something from the 1970s due to some of the ways it was filmed and stuff like that. Overall, I felt like they did a good job of capturing that era, capturing that vibe. I think that the acting overall was quite good. Sometimes it got a little bit stagey, a little bit kind of big, but that fit the concept. It fit the idea that people would be kind of hamming it up a little bit on this talk show. The kind of big, overly big, campy kind of style of presenting themselves really worked for a large part of the movie, because that's what you would expect people to be doing on a show like this. But the core of the movie is David Dastmalchian as the star, as the host of the talk show, who really proves his chops here, and I think really solidifies the idea that he could be a leading man. Now, I don't mean leading man like a Robert Redford, Tom Cruise type, but he can hold down a movie on his own. Like, he's really one of those kind of like, oh, it's that guy kind of character actors, right? You've seen him in a lot of stuff. You recognize his face. You might not really know his name, but you've seen him in a lot of stuff, and he's always been good. Here, he's front and center. You are focused on him, and I buy it. I buy into him as a guy who could anchor a movie, who could carry it on his shoulders, because he does here. And I buy that he could be a leading man in the sense that I think, there's a whole subplot where that somebody finds him attractive. And I'm like, yeah, I buy into that. I buy into this. I buy into his appeal, both as maybe, a romantic interest, and as the host of a talk show, somebody who's very popular, people respond to and like. He sold me on that. He gives a great performance here, possibly the best of his career so far, but I think he's going to get a lot more work based on what he's done here. Everything was working gangbusters for me. Where it fell a little short for me is the hype that was around it. I mentioned earlier, did it live up to this hype, and did that influence me? A little bit, because by the time I caught this, it was pretty big, a lot of buzz, like 97% on Rotten Tomatoes at the time I saw it. The horror community was really into it. Everybody was excited about it. People were starting to talk about it, and I was just trying to avoid spoilers in it. And it was hyped. And so I went in with some high expectations. I had some I don't know. I don't know what I expected for sure, but I knew I was expecting to get my socks knocked off. And I can't say that I got my socks knocked off. Like I said, the ending kind of going away from the style and the concept that they had originally established did kind of take me out of the movie a little bit. It didn't really mesh up, and it kind of went away from the thing that I was enjoying the most about the movie. I don't think so much so that it took me out completely. I wasn't like out on the movie. I wasn't angry about it, but I at that point my expectations were so high that it couldn't help but be lowered a little bit by that kind of misstep for me. And again, I'm trying not to spoil the ending, so I'm kind of dancing around it a little bit. But suffice to say that it just feels a little bit different. And there's a different way they could have gone about with the way they had the mockumentary framework of this movie. They could have leveraged that for a stronger ending, in my opinion. But I don't like to criticize movies for what they didn't do. I like to focus more on what they did do. And in this case, what they did do was a little bit of a misstep, and it did take me out a little bit. The other thing about this movie that has kind of spun things around a little bit and taken a little bit of a backlash to the buzz and popularity of this movie is the use of artificial intelligence to make some images in the movie. I guess there's some interstitial cards that were used with AI, and I'll be honest, this didn't bother me at all. If you have opinions about AI that are strong, good for you. If you don't want to watch this movie because they used AI, good for you. I don't have any problems with anybody choosing not to watch something. That's your prerogative, and I'm generally speaking very supportive of people choosing what they do and do not want to watch. I didn't have a problem with this. I don't have a big problem with the use of AI at this stage right now. I understand the concerns that people have regarding job security and artists being kind of supplanted and stuff like that. But I guess my feeling about AI at this stage is the way I feel about CGI. Really, when CGI came in 25, 30 years ago and started supplanting all of the practical effects workers, the mask makers, the makeup artists, the prop makers and doll makers and things like that. They got displaced by different kinds of artists. I feel like that's kind of the same thing is going to be happening here. I don't know how to see the future on that one, but that's kind of where I'm at on it. Is that to me it's just a different technology, but I realize a lot of people were very, very sensitive to this, and it did have a backlash in the movie. I saw quite a bit of it. People basically boycotting the movie because of the AI, which is a shame because, again, the AI is very minimal in this. And the movie itself is overall quite good. Like I said, there's some missteps, and maybe it doesn't live up to that 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, massive buzz from the community type thing. But did it live up to syllabus level quality? Let's find out. So it's time for the age-old question. Is it syllabus worthy? And the answer is probably. The quality is there for the movie. It feels like sort of a fresh take on possession. I love me some possession movies, and I love when something new comes out in that subgenre, something that feels a little bit different. Now, this is not so much new as it is kind of just taking other ideas and mishmashing them together into something that feels new, kind of Tarantino-esque in a way, if you will. It's more pastiche than original, but it feels original because of the pastiche. It feels like they've repackaged it into something new that I'm finding entertaining, and I think a lot of other people did as well. And compared to more modern possession movies, or just like the flotsam that we've seen in the possession subgenre, the Exorcist knockoffs, if you will, it's much more noteworthy than those because it does something different. It tries to avoid the same tropes. It goes into some of them, but for the most part, it's trying to do something a little different than what we've seen over and over and over again. Now, the reason why I say probably instead of an emphatic yes is a question of longevity. It's a really new movie, and so I've yet to see if this movie has staying power, if there's going to be if it's going to be talked about for years to come, or if it's just going to kind of fade away. Because we've seen that with some other movies where everybody's really crazy and talking about it and buzzed about it, and then it just kind of gets forgotten pretty quickly. Sometimes I like to shine a light on those on the channel and say, hey, remember this movie? It was really good, and nobody talks about it anymore. So I think that I'd probably say yes. That's why I say probably, because even if it does kind of fade away a little bit, I think that people will remember this moment in time and this movie being very noteworthy at the time, especially, depending on how the future of AI goes. The discussion about that here will be something that'll be interesting to point back in the future and look back at the past on this and see, hey, this is what we were saying at the time about that. So I do think there's enough notoriety to this movie to make it onto the horror movie syllabus. In this possession subgenre, that's the obvious place to go, although it's also one of the most competitive one. I could maybe throw it into like the found footage subgenre, also competitive. Maybe the throwbacks subgenre, which probably fits pretty well here. we're doing a period piece subgenre in the near future, or in the future at least, that one might be, it's just kind of recent for a period piece, but you get the idea. The fact that it's set in the 70s and using that aesthetic and everything, that it gives it a couple of different subgenres we could try to squeeze it into. So I feel like it would make it. I feel like it's probably a yes, and that's why I say probably. I think this is probably a bona fide horror movie syllabus contender. So I'm going to say probably yes. So that's going to be it. That's going to be our look at the Late Night with the Devil movie. And this is my thoughts on it. And of course, people have some strong opinions of this movie, both positively and negatively. Feel free to share those in the comments below. Keep it civil, obviously. But I'm interested in hearing what you guys thought of the movie, especially the ending, without spoiling it for other people. The ending of the movie, let me know what you think about it. If you have the same opinion I have about it, and did it ruin the movie for you, or were you able to roll with it? But first, let's go ahead and roll with a card of Trivia Pursuit questions. I'm going to read a question here on camera and try to answer it here on camera. And because it's Late Night with the Devil, let's go with the paranormal category. And the question is, what actress portrayed Thomason in 2015's The Witch, or The Vivitch, if you will? And I know the answer to this question. And we've talked about The Witch. I love The Witch. Robert Eggers is hit and miss with me. As you guys remember, I loved The Witch. I didn't love The Lighthouse as much, but I do think he's an excellent director, and this movie is fantastic. And the actor that portrayed Thomason in this was absolutely fantastic too. Now, it's interesting because they're giving me a character name, and we've had these come up recently and throughout the entire time we've been doing these questions. I don't do well with character names, but I know this one. This is one that I actually know. Like, sometimes I'm kind of having to guess from context who the character is they're talking about, and in recent times I've made the wrong guess and had the wrong answer because I guessed the wrong character. In this case, I know exactly the character. I remembered the name of the character. I don't know why I remember the name of the character, probably because it's kind of odd, but I remember the name of the character, so I'm feeling pretty smart today. I'm feeling pretty good about myself, so I'm kind of prattling on a little bit, of course, as I do, to give you guys a chance to think about it, but use some common sense here. If you're not sure, guess, and your guess will probably be right if you know anything about The Vivitch. Let's go ahead and lock in your answers, because I'm going to give my answer now. My answer is, of course, Anya Taylor-Joy, the star of the movie, the main character, Thomason. And let me just double check the card. Anya Taylor-Joy. Anya Taylor-Joy. So yeah, that one, again, it was kind of easy for me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I remember the name Thomason because Anya Taylor-Joy is in Late Night in Soho, and she opposite Thomason McKenzie, so there's a connection there. I don't know why I remember the name, but I did. But I got it right. I hope you guys got it right too. More importantly, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for sticking around to the end. By all means, drop some suggestions of additional movies in the comments below. We're looking for recommendations all the time, and maybe we'll wind up putting yours in another video in the future. But until then, I'm just gonna say, class dismissed.